Now, This Week in Texoma.
Welcome to the program. Our guest is Mayor Ritchie Dennington of Duncan. He was recently elected mayor after spending a lot of time on the city council. We thought it'd be a good idea to bring him over and introduce him to you folks and get a little better feel for his background and what he hopes to accomplish in his new role as mayor at the city of Duncan. Mayor Dennington, appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You bet. I mentioned that you'd served on the council for the people in Duncan are probably pretty well familiar with you. Folks in Lawton and outside the surrounding areas may not be quite as familiar. Tell the folks a little bit about your background.
Well, several years ago, I was a member of the Planning Commission for several years, and then took a break from that, and then ran for city council. I was was elected, was city councilman a little over 4 years, and then got the opportunity to run for mayor, and I've been mayor nearly a year now, coming up in May. So.
And what was the kind of the initiative to go ahead and say, let me go ahead and run for mayor? Do you have people tapping you on the shoulder, or was just something after being in the office you thought, hey, this is what we need to do?
Well, I had some people approach me about running, and then I had basically told them I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because I had other things. I had some, at the time my father was still alive and wasn't doing well with health, and the filing period was February 2nd to February the 4th, and he passed away February 1st, and it was a shock. But then I went ahead and filed, and didn't really expect the sitting mayor Gene Brown to run again, and he did, and I barely squeaked by. Gene was great. It was a great race, great man.
Right. So. And it was a good one of those good clean elections that you like, where the voters come in and they've really got good choices on both sides of it.
Well, like I say, I ran for mayor. I didn't run against Gene. I couldn't win that race.
Now let's talk about some of the things that you guys are dealing with in the city of Duncan. Everybody had to deal with the drought over the past couple of years. You guys were in dire straits, just like most of us were, really in severe weather conditions and water restrictions. Everybody made it out of that, but that gave everyone kind of a chance to rethink their water structure. Talk about some of the things that came out of the drought and some of the policies and the programs you guys have put in place to expand water sources, et cetera.
Well, we recognized quickly that we needed to upgrade our lakes' pumping abilities, and we're in the process of that. We're redoing the pumps at the Clear Creek, and there'll be a little extension to the line, or rebuild of a line that has to be done on that, which we've let out some engineering studies and contracts on that. Lake Humphreys, we ran into a contractor failed to perform, and we're in arbitration right now. Unfortunately, the rain came, or we'd really be in dire straits. But it's a matter of being able to move Waurika water into Humphreys, and then pump Humphreys back in. So that lets us that, and of course, and as you all know, it same way with Lawton pulling out of Waurika. They moved the intake to a better place in the lake, and with the dredging, and so that improved that. Our gain on that is really good. So we're still looking into other things. There's other options out there that we're still trying to look into. You know, what anybody that's seen a graph, and we saw a lot of them during the drought. In every major drought, there's been a wet season or a year or so of wet weather that kind of got you through it. And we're really afraid that's what we're in right now, is just that wet part. So we've got to get our feet back under us and start planning and get things going. And Duncan created, with the help of the Duncan Economic Foundation, was DADEF, the Water Advisory Committee. And they've really been a big help to us on that, which is a real good group of diverse citizens.
That's some professional, if I remember right when they put that together, so some professionals, like some engineering talent and that kind of thing.
Yes, engineering, businessmen, lawyers, just guys with good sense, and women that understand business and everything. So it was, and how everything affected everything. So it's been great.
And I would bet too that this next round, if we do start having some problems and we've got to go into water restriction again, the learning process or the education process for the public will be a lot shorter, because before you almost kind of have this thing of, we got to conserve because it could get awful, and then it rains, and we're okay.
We're okay.
We know last year it wasn't theoretical. I mean, it's real life, and it can really change your life.
Well, what we learned was we kept expecting it to rain.
Right.
And so we kept putting off the restrictions, kept putting them off and dragging them up, because, you know, people would say, well, I don't want my garden to die, I don't want my flowers to die. And you try to listen to, and what we learned was when we reach those points, that if we're at 80% and it triggers stage 1, we go to stage 1 now, you know, not 90 days, not a year. And so we learned that we had to move fast.
Yeah, it does improve the sense of urgency to that. And then people aren't going to hopefully complain quite as loud, because they remember what it was not like.
You know, the citizens of Duncan cut their water usage by nearly 50% voluntarily. And of course, then that puts you in a catch-22 situation to where you start losing revenues. So, you know, and it's a bad situation.
Every city had to deal with that kind of thing. Whenever you talk about some of these projects that are going on, they're quite expensive to do. Whenever you're talking about infrastructure in terms of improving the water supply, is that something that comes out of the city's general fund, or are you going to need to, if these projects take a larger step, would be something you'd have to go back to voters to see if they would help fund something? How would that work potentially?
If we get into something huge, we may have to go to the voters, but right now we can deal with the capital improvements, and most of our stuff has already been set aside. Now the Warrika dredging project was an additional loan over a longer period of time. So, but it was a no choice kind of thing. But most of the projects are capital improvements, and we can move those step at a time.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about the economy in Duncan. Everybody kind of knows in Lawton you've got Fort Sill and how that has a dramatic impact on the economy whenever it comes to Duncan. Halliburton is one of the main drivers over there. People have been following the news, know the layoffs that have been hitting the energy industry in Oklahoma. It's hit Halliburton as well. We've reported on some of the layoffs there. What can you tell us about how things are going and how that impacts the economy there in Duncan, and what you guys are able to do to kind of ride these waves out?
Well, we're like everyone else in Duncan. We feel the sting real quick, and the layoffs are a part of the business. People start to, you know, when there's a boom, you always think it's going to last forever. It never does, and so we're going through the down cycle right now. You know, we see that in our sales tax immediately. It hits real quick. But as far as, you know, it's not an unknown. We've been through this before, and we'll come back. Halliburton comes back. It's a sad thing to see all the equipment stacked out there, just millions and millions of dollars. But, you know, the people of Duncan are very resilient. Once again, the people that's involved with the jobs, we've got certain people that are going to them saying, can you add one? Can you add another? And you know, start to work with Workforce Oklahoma and get those out, and you know, just kind of like I say, Duncan's a very, very close community, and has been through this. But you know, like I say, we feel not only Halliburton, but everyone gets it. All the little machine shops, all the suppliers, the clothing.
There's a lot of extraneous kind of ancillary businesses that tie into that directly. But every time we've talked about it, it does seem like, you know, Lyle Rogo with the Area Economic Development Foundation and the folks at the Chamber of Commerce, Chris Deal, his group, they all seem to get together and kind of, it's almost like in disaster mode following a tornado, right? I mean, and maybe that's because of the experience that the people have there with the city, knowing these cycles are going to come. Well,
like I say, you watch that oil price start down, and it's kind of like our water levels. We kept expecting it to rain. You kept expecting the oil to stop, and it didn't. We see a little ray. You know, it started back up now, but it's not where it needs to be. And you know, at this time, everybody always talks about diversifying. Well, we're just kind of anchored in oil, and it's just the way we are. But we will get through this. You know, we saw a big decrease in the sales tax by 20% the month before last. This one we saw a little increase from year to year, but we're going to have to run off an average. We started already cutting the city budget by 10 departments, cutting them
Right.
back by 10%. We've always watched our hiring. We've been, you know, the city's not in great shape like any other government institution right now, but we're, like you say, kind of in a disaster mode,
Right.
and we'll get through it.
And your fiscal year, is it mid-year? Does it roll, or do you guys follow on the calendar
We
year
follow
also?
calendar year.
Okay, so you
Right.
guys are just barely getting started.
Just getting
and I know we had
started, yes.
had a conversation with City Manager Jim Frieda the other day about those 10% cuts. He said he's just going to basically kind of keep an eye on them
Right.
as they come in each month, as they go month to month.
Right.
So I guess there's just kind of a sense of everybody's just trying to tighten their belts as best they can and look down the road and see what else we can trim if necessary.
Yes, that's what we look at. We're looking at other ways of doing business. Everything's on the table. You know, we've got in times like this, there's a lot of opportunities to make changes, and doing things the same old way may not be the same way to do them anymore.
Right.
And you know, we're not looking at anything. There's nothing out there on the table that's earth-shaking right now. But some cities are doing things different, and we're looking at those. In times like this, people are a little more open to it. But the last thing we want to do is someone lose their job over this thing. So we've asked more and more of our city employees over the years. We've run 10 short and more than that in departments, and they've stepped up to the plate. So we want to try to, you know, you can never assure anybody that they've got a job, but we're really just wanting to maintain what we've got and look for opportunities, and hopefully we'll get out of this thing.
Let's look at some other things you have down the road. April 15th and 16th, one of the more popular things in Duncan is the Cruising the Chisholm Trail car show. Talk a little bit about that, and for people who don't know about it, what they could see if they come out.
It is a huge event in Duncan, and Duncan's a car town. Just about any weekend, there's almost a car show any place you go. Just looking around, if you look up and down 81, Duncan, like I say, it's historically been a car show. And I don't know, it's hundreds of cars. Main Street's blocked off, and they've got a band playing. They'll have food, trophies. I myself get to give a mayor's trophy.
Nice.
My dad was a restored cars, and so I've got a background in that. I have a couple myself that I've kept, and so it's exciting. It was my dad's hobby. It's not mine, but I really can appreciate a fine car, and they always do a great job on the planning and putting it together.
And they have like a parade and a burnout contest like on that Friday afternoon and evening.
Yes, they've got the burnout contest, and this is put on by Main Street Duncan. Destiny Allfinger, she's in charge of Main Street Duncan, and there's a whole committee that does it, and it is something for everybody. It really is.
We'll put that on your calendars, April 15th and 16th, and that takes a little of the sting off of tax day, I guess. You can go down and watch the burnout.
Look for a getaway car, maybe.
That'd be good.
There you go.
Mayor Dennington, we appreciate you taking the time to visit with us.
All right.
Welcome back to the program. Dwight Tanner, Lawton City Councilman, is here, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on at City Hall these days. He's serving Ward 5 as the council representative since 2013. It's the first time to have him on our program. Appreciate you taking the time to visit with us today.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
You bet. Let's talk a little bit about something that's kind of recently in the news. The council had a special meeting a few days ago. We've got another one scheduled next week to talk about some possible revisions to the city charter. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, because it was one of your ideas that you wanted to bring up for a council item that kind of sparked this whole process.
Well, originally I wanted to make a change or propose a change. This has to go out before a vote of the people that would require top-level city administrators, appointed officials. There's about 15 top-level administrators that this would affect. After we hire them, that they would have to move to Lawton, register to vote, and get a water bill because we need the money.
Right. And then it turned out whenever you made those proposals, they said, well, wait a minute, that's ordinance-wise, that's not going to kind of work. We need to put that in, and that's when you realize, okay, that's a charter change that has to happen, right?
Well, I talked to the city attorney, Frank Jensen, and to check out the legality of residential requirements, residency requirements for the city employees to see if it was legal.
Right.
He said that you can't do it by ordinance. It has to be a charter change. And therefore, you put it before a vote of the people. If they say yes, then we can do this.
And it turns out that there were a couple of other councilmen you figured out once you kind of said this is something we can do, then floated it out, and then it turned out that Councilman Wells and Councilman Phillips, they also had separately been thinking of similar ideas about that needed to be changed, right?
Frank Jensen, I wanted to keep it simple.
Right.
I just wanted to make this proposal, agenda it. The council could decide whether they wanted to send this out to a vote of the people or not.
Right.
But Frank, the city attorney, Frank Jensen, said, hey, there's a few other council members that they have some changes that they want to look into, so you should form this council committee. So I agended that item, and then it morphed into a full council committee, which is what we had last week, and we brought our proposals forth. The next coming meeting, which will be this Wednesday, at that point in time, the council will decide by a vote of at least 5 council members whether these ideas will be sent out to the public for a vote.
And those, you had mentioned the residency requirements for the city officials. Councilman Wells had wanted to eliminate primary elections for the mayor and the council. You just get elected whoever the greater number of votes
Yeah,
is.
if you went winner takes all.
Right.
But you know, some people don't like that idea because they think you need at least 50% of the vote. But that's the beauty of this. If it goes before a vote of the people can say, hey, I don't like the idea. I like to keep it just like it is, and they can vote no.
Right. The other proposal comes from Councilman, or another proposal from Councilman Wells is to remove term limits for mayor and the city council. That got a little bit of discussion back and forth the other day in your first meeting, right?
Well, Councilman Wells has confided in me that he plans to live to be 120.
I can see him wanting to do that.
So he doesn't want to interrupt his council tenure.
Right. And that is, and you know, he had talked about during that meeting, I remember he had said, kind of looked at what was going on at the state legislature where term limits have been enacted. The people voted, they wanted term limits for their state lawmakers. And sometimes that's good because if you've got, you know, an incumbent that kind of has that power of incumbency to keep getting reelected, sometimes that can be a negative thing. But he talked about sometimes the positivity of having some institutional knowledge and some clout, and thinks that might benefit people on the city council as well.
What he's saying makes sense. Once you've been in office for a while, you've gained the experience, the knowledge, the relationships, and you give all that up with term limits. So what he's saying is it's probably good to maintain this experience and knowledge from the politicians, because what could happen, according to him, is you wind up with a system where the bureaucrats, you know, the employees, the state employees or the city employees who have been on the job for multiple years wind up running things. You know, creating this policy.
They turn into the policymakers.
Because you have the rookie politicians that have no experience.
Right.
And by the time they gain the experience, well, they're out too.
Yeah.
So that's his argument.
And Councilman Cherry Phillips wanted to add some language stating that a person who'd been convicted of a felony or a misdemeanor involving embezzlement disqualified them as an individual for office of the mayor or the city council. And again, all those 3 things were proposals that were brought up.
Brought up at the last meeting.
And you guys are going to discuss it again on Wednesday, and so will you emerge from that meeting with a decision on whether it goes forward? Mayor Fitch had mentioned after that first meeting that maybe they wanted to try to open it all into kind of a town hall type thing where the public could maybe be involved in this decision as well.
This is the next step. From here, the council will vote on these ideas, these proposals, and then quite possibly we will have another meeting that is open to the public, and they can come in and present their ideas for or against, or maybe a totally different idea.
And your hope is that this gets settled relatively quickly, because ideally you would like to, and the people in the city, I guess, would like to put this as part of the general election that we have in
want it
November.
in the November election. And hopefully this proposal that I have, which I think is a fair proposal. In the city charter right now, there's only 2 employees that are required to live in Lawton after we hire them. That's the city manager and the city attorney. Well, this was the original language. those were the only two city administrators at the time.
I see.
And then for years after that, it was just considered an obligatory function that after we hire you as a top level city administrator that you have to live in Lawton.
And so that, and you're just hoping to codify that so that
I want to put that in law.
Right.
So that we had a finance director, Brooks Mitchell, really good at what he did, but he never moved to Lawton. He commuted back and forth from Oklahoma City. And it's a lengthy process to hire these type of employees, especially the city finance director.
Right.
And so when, because he wasn't living here, this was my opinion, he didn't have any roots, he wasn't really invested in the community. When a better job came open, closer to home, he took it.
Right. And this, again, if it does advance forward, these changes will be presented to the public to decide whether they want to change the city charter. And we'll keep our eyes on that over the next several weeks to see if it does advance that way. Topic we want to talk about now is something that we mentioned on 7 News a couple of weeks back, that Mr. Tanner's involved with, along with a couple of other entities, and it involves Ron Stevens Stadium. People who are longtime residents of this area know Ron Stevens Stadium well. People who may have moved here in the last 10 or 15 years might not be so familiar with it. Why don't you talk a little bit about the stadium, kind of its place in Lawton's history, and what you're trying to do to help it out?
Well, originally, Ron Stevens Stadium was Roosevelt Stadium. It was a WPA project. It was built back in 1936, provided a lot of local jobs for our community. But as the years have gone by, you know, it's starting to show us its age. And about 10 years ago, the south wall fell down. And so what we're trying to do is come up with the money to repair this south wall. And I got with my Ward 5 LEDA representative, Alan Hampton, spoke to him about it to get LEDA's support in this, which we have. We spoke to the superintendent, Tom Deegan, to see if it'd be all right if we raised the money to fix this wall. He said no problem. He sent out his second in command, Kyle Smith, and then Councilman Morford. I didn't know this, but he has already had some action going on this. So we got together, got my group together, his group together. He brought a lot more assets to the table than I'll ever have. And we actually have had an estimate done yesterday. They're going to give it to us next week sometime.
Rough idea, though. I mean, do you have, because I think at the time we had talked that it might be a couple of $100,000, $250,000. Is that kind of a ballpark that we're looking at, or is it still kind of too early to put a number on that?
Based off of the school's estimate, that's about 8 years old, or so it's an older estimate. It was $250,000, but this was to rebuild the whole south wall and a few other spots around the stadium. We had the city manager come out, you know, he's an engineer, and look at this, and George Hennessy, the city's engineer, and they said that they thought possibly we could just repair the damaged area. If that's the case, then it's going to cost substantially less.
Right. Have you gotten to the point where you can kind of set up any kind of, you know, fundraiser or events or anything like that, or is that still kind of percolating a little bit?
We've got an ad hoc committee, Manette Page, with the Heritage Foundation, and she wants to put everything back exactly like it was, which is fine. So we've got that element. We've got Councilman Morford, Preston Holsinger, I can't remember the groundskeeper's name, but Coach Oslager, Alan Hampton, myself, and Joe Tilton with the Fairmont District. So we've formulated a nice size fair representative committee.
Well, I know whenever we put it out there, we got, you know, a handful of responses on our Facebook and that kind of thing, and people talking about, oh, I remember the good old days of going out there, or people saying I played there and that kind of thing. So it sounds like a project that once the awareness kind of raises up and it kind of firms up a little bit about what you're shooting for, I'm guessing you're going to have quite a bit of people who are going to try to figure out a way to help you out with it.
This is one of these projects that you got to love as a politician, because everybody's for it.
Yeah, no controversy on that one. Well, let's talk about, quickly, we only have about a minute and a half left, about the animal shelter. A lot of difficulty with that at one point, but things have really turned around. They've been doing some city adoption efforts that they've really gotten a lot of attention on. So talk just a little bit about the success of that and some of the other things you're trying to do at the shelter.
The animal shelter is leaps and bounds ahead of where it was a year and a half ago. We've put Jim Russell, the assistant city manager, in charge of the animal shelter. We've got a new director, Russell Anderson. We call them the Russells.
Right.
And they've cleaned the facility up, got new ventilation. Retired General Baxter has donated some equipment.
You bet.
So there's a lot of support down there. The volunteers that come in and help make these changes, it's really very positive. We focused on the adoption end of this. Now we've got some local legislation coming up, some fee changes to help the front end of the process. If you have your animal impounded, we want to make the process of redeeming that animal as easy as possible. We want you to come get your animal. We don't want to have to adopt it out. So we're working on these things.
Well, and it's, like I said, that's another project that a lot of people are glad that they see it happen, and you guys got things reversed in a hurry. So congratulations to the city and everybody who worked together on that. Mr. Tanner, we appreciate you taking the time to visit with you today.
You're welcome. Thank you. God bless you.
All right, Dwight Tanner, Lawton City Councilman, has been our guest. Thank you for joining us, folks. We'll see you next time.
If you have a topic or issue you'd like us to focus on, please write to the address on your screen or fax us at 357-3811. Or you can email us.